This video is a supplement to my Lobotomy Corporation video. It was originally in the script, but I felt it broke the flow too much, so I decided to turn it into its own video. Today, we're talking about abnormalities, what they are, what they might mean, and how that relates to the game as a whole. First off, let's get one thing straight. Abnormalities are archetypes given form. Because of that, they can be interpreted in various different ways to fill any kind of story. One might even say that's their intended role in the greater Project Moon canon. A lot of what I'm going to say here is generally agreed upon, but still very, very open to speculation. Because of this, I want to emphasize that other interpretations are not necessarily right or wrong, just different from mine. In the world of Project Moon, there are two abnormalities that, as unique as they are, have become almost synonymous with the series. These two abnormalities are frequently referred to as the Superbosses of Lobotomy Corporation, as they generally push your facility into an unrecoverable state. Couple that with their rather unique conditions of appearing, and they sit idly in our heads for the rest of our playthrough, even if we never kill them. I am, of course, talking about Apocalypse Bird and White Knight. Apocalypse Bird starts life as a trio of abnormalities. All three of these birds are connected by their shared home, the Black Forest. Not much is really known about the Black Forest, as it hasn't even been mentioned in later games, but it's a real place in the setting that the real birds, don't ask, lived in. Each bird had an interest in protecting the Black Forest and its denizens from a beast that would lure other animals to their deaths. Their fear of that beast was brought about when they denied a particular traveler from entering the Black Forest. The stranger, angered, handed down a prophecy. Soon, a tragedy will befall the forest. It will be tainted with misdeeds and evil, and there will be constant conflict. The tragedies will only stop when a terrible beast appears and devours everything. The sun and moon will shine upon the forest no longer. The forest will never go back to what it was before. This is where their story begins. Big Bird is a massive, flightless and featherless bird completely covered in eyes. It once acted as a community watch, using those eyes to watch for the beast. When someone asked what it would do if the beast came at night, it burned all of its feathers to create an everlasting lamp. During its watch, it decided that the only way to prevent more deaths to the beast was to save creatures itself. To do this, it began to bite off the heads of the creatures that had once trusted it, luring them in with its lamp. Similarly, Punishing Bird used to be Small Bird. Like Big Bird, it wanted to protect the people of the forest from the beast, and did so by punishing sinners by pecking them. In-game, this abnormality will escape and peck random employees. The attacks are weak, but if we decide to counterattack, the bird grows a gigantic mouth and devours the offender whole. Just like now, someone mocked Small Bird, saying its pecks were not enough to dissuade sin. That mouth in its belly is the result. Finally, Judgment Bird used to be known as Longbird. Tall and lanky, it judged the sins of those in the Black Forest. Once, it was an even-handed judge. It had become worried that there would be sin it wasn't able to judge. To this end, it broke its scale so it always leaned towards one side. It had eyes that could see through anything, but it gave those to Big Bird to help it protect the other creatures. Wrapping its head in bandages, it fell into decay as the feathers on its beautiful head fell out. Together, all three of these birds perform individual services for the residents of Black Forest. They each fell to their own desire to be useful. They gave everything for their community. Big Bird burned his feathers for his lamp. Small Bird mutilated itself to create a more terrifying punishment. Tall Bird gave up the ability to see and judge fairly. They care deeply for their community, but in protecting it, they alienate or kill those they are protecting. When the other forest creatures started complaining about the birds, they were confused. Why couldn't anyone see how much they had sacrificed? The birds decided there was no way they could protect the forest well enough while working separately. To this end, they combined their power and became Apocalypse Bird. terrible monster lives in the dark black forest. But the three birds did not see a monster. They began to stalk the forest, standing guard against the beast they never found. Apocalypse Bird is well known, but we don't see much discourse on it. The storybook entries that play as it forms in the game are iconic, so much so that I've likely used them during that video. It's infamous for appearing out of nowhere for unsuspecting new players, as it can form any time all three birds are present and two of them have breached. And yet, its representation, or lack thereof, in Lobotomy Corporation's story gives us very little to work on. There are probably hundreds of ways you could interpret it. Numerous people have drawn a parallel between Apocalypse Birds and the Head, and my personal take, backed up by developer Q&As, is that it's a representation of authoritarian regimes in general. These governments are made of individual people who may still be trying to help the people within the government's domain. Their efforts either go unappreciated or simply escalate naturally, and for the sake of efficiency, they join forces with other smaller governments to protect and govern as many people as possible. These governments are wholly unaware of the monster they've become, but from the perspective of those underneath them, it's painfully obvious. In-game, Apocalypse Bird has indirect ties to Binna. Both of them are heavily linked to the concept of the shadow, and both were part of a ruling body. Both of them do not acknowledge themselves as monsters. Binna doesn't even recognize herself as human. Both of them carry with them an aura of fear as something that has been dragged unwillingly into the light. One of the many lessons we take away from Binna is that we are capable of monstrous actions in the name of performing good. The further we justify our actions, the more monstrous we might become. Each of the three birds also followed this logic. Ultimately, the connection would be further canonized in Library of Ruina, but for now, it's something we have to notice for ourselves. And then we have White Knight, who is much easier to summarize. Like Apocalypse Bird, White Knight has a habit of appearing without warning. Unlike Apocalypse Bird, White Knight has no story associated with it. When we first meet it, it takes the form of a seemingly benevolent plague doctor. Each time a new employee works with it, it blesses the employee. They gain an ego gift, are fully healed, and an hour on a gigantic clock is filled with the employee's name. With each employee, the plague doctor changes a little bit, initially just gaining more white in its black outfit, but progressively taking on a more angelic appearance. As soon as all 12 employees are blessed, it changes into its true form and breaches. At this point, the first 11 of the blessed employees turn into demonic angels and stalk the halls of the facility, quickly killing everyone they meet. White Knight sits above the department at Breachstat, pulsing out massive rings of damage. It usually doesn't take long for everyone to die. During this first breach, the player cannot pause or end the day, as White Knight actively prevents these actions. The only agent they can control is the 12th blessed employee, referred to as Judas. From here, most people only have one way to kill White Knight, and that's to send Judas to the very first abnormality in the game, one sin and hundreds of good deeds, and use the confession action. This instantly kills the false angel and allows the day to finally be completed, or reset. White Knight is infamous for that initial day more than anything else. Since it's possible to access it extremely early in the game, it's a guaranteed surprise for new players. It also locks them into that day, forcing them to watch every employee you have die to continue. It teaches players a very simple lesson. All abnormalities are dangerous, no matter how beneficial they may seem. There's a few different ways to take White Knight's symbolism. However, it's hard to avoid the similarities to a specific character, Carmen. I cover her more in my main video, but the key parallel here is that Carmen is an extremely altruistic and kind-hearted person who seemingly only wants to do good. Just like the Plague Doctor, she seems to be a blessing on those she touches, but also regresses, or maybe evolves, to an angelic form after a certain amount of time. Just like White Knight, she leaves a group of apostles, including a traitor, in a bid to change the world. One sin is worth mentioning here too. As the very first abnormality in the game, it's impossible to have White Knight without a way to deal with it. More importantly, one sin is a possible representation of the manager themselves, and specifically their drive to complete the Seed of Light project. Adam, the final shard of Keter, says this himself when he says that one sin is alright if you accomplish hundreds, no thousands, of good deeds. Ayan himself has done numerous awful things, but it's all in the name of accomplishing the Seed of Light project. That, on its own, absolves sin, and it's something that one sin specifically is used for. When White Knight escapes, we confess to it to remove it, which brings us back to what I think White Knight actually is. White Knight is blatantly an Antichrist figure, masquerading as an angel. And we know one other character like that in this story.
Adam!
Adam, at the end of Lobotomy Corporation, has one goal, and that's to force ascension on all of the residents of the city, much like how the employees ascended to the Apostles during the White Knight breach. Ayan himself never wanted that though. By the end of his journey, he wanted to give people the choice to ascend, allowing them to choose how and when they accomplish their glorious evolution. Eventually, we have to choose to either confess to one sin, or take the much harder and more dangerous route of confronting White Knight ourselves. Doing so grants near godlike powers to a single employee who wields both its weapon and armor, but at the cost of requiring us to keep it in the facility. We cannot forget what it took to get here, as that would rob it of its meaning. Finally, it's important to remember that these are archetypes. White Knight's categorization as a trauma abnormality indicates it might be loosely seen as a fear of religion, and I think it's a great way to portray it. Religion, at its best, is something wholly beneficial to us. At its worst, it's a justification for massacres, crusades, and jihads. White Knight represents both of these. If you choose to keep it in the facility, it becomes one of the easiest Aleph level abnormalities to manage, healing everyone in the facility routinely and gives some of the strongest gear in the game. But there's always the reminder that you can't ever take it for granted. Ignore it long enough, and it changes into a vengeful god, quickly forcing a day reset or a confrontation. At the very least, it will always kill those it has blessed, possibly indicating that those most at risk of religion's swift turns are those who subscribe to it themselves. At their core, both of the super abnormalities are primal creatures. It's hard to say for sure exactly what they represent, as any single interpretation fails to describe the entirety of the creature. As with anything of great power and size, they are nebulous beings of pure concept. Defeating them is a sign of just how much we've overcome, and comes with incredible rewards. White Knight hands over its weapon, allowing one of your agents to become nigh immortal. Apocalypse Bird grants its wings as an ego gift to all remaining employees that survive the rampage, along with its own ego, Twilight. They're some of the greatest hurdles in the game, and defeating them is an optional, albeit rewarding, challenge.